Algebra 2, Unit 8, Study Guide, Rational Functions. So let's look at number 1, multiplying or dividing the rational functions. Be sure to state any restrictions on variables or exclusions for the domains that are needed. So the first thing we want to do is factor any numerator or denominator that we can. So the numerator on the left, that's a trinomial. So we're looking for two numbers that will multiply to give us a times c, which is negative 12, and will combine to give us our b value, which is negative 1. So negative 4 and 3 will do that for us. So we can factor that as x minus 4 times x plus 3. With our denominator, we just have a common factor of 4 that we can divide out, and it's the greatest common factor, so we'll be left with x plus 3. Now, since we're dividing, I'm going to change to multiplication, and I'm going to flip. So my denominator of 6 will become my numerator, and then I'm going to factor that trinomial, two numbers that will multiply to give me 8 and combine to give me negative 6. So negative 4 and negative 2 will work. So now when we multiply, we can divide out any numerator with any denominator. And so our x minus 4s will divide out, our x plus 3s will divide out, so we'll be left with just a 6 in our numerator, and then over 4 times x minus 2. We want to see if we can simplify this, and so I notice that I can divide my numerator and my denominator by 2. So we're left with 3 over 2 times x minus 2. Now, our exclusion rule needs to say that x cannot equal, and then we'll go up to the step just before, and we'll look at all those denominators. So in our first fraction, negative 3 would make that denominator 0. In our second fraction, we consider both the numerator and the denominator because they both have time working as the denominator. So we don't need to exclude anything for the 6, but in the two expressions below, we need to exclude a positive 4 and a positive 2. So our final answer is 3 over 2 times the quantity x minus 2, and x cannot equal negative 3, 4, and 2. Let's continue multiplying or dividing by looking at number 2. So this one asks us to divide. Before we divide, we can simplify either of those fractions. So I notice that on my left, I can divide both the top and the bottom by 15. So I'm left with 1/3. And that I can divide 2 of my x's out with 2 in the denominator, and I'll have 1 left. Now I'm going to change to multiplication and flip. So I'll have 9x to the 4th over 5x to the 6th. I notice that I can simplify those x's, but I think I will multiply first and then simplify. So 1 times 9x to the 4th is just that, all over 15x to the 7th. Now let's divide out our numerator and denominator by 3, so we'll be left with 3/5. And then we can divide out the 4 x's in our numerator with 4 of them from our denominator, and we'll be left with 3. So our final answer will be 3 over 5x cubed, and then we will need to exclude 0, because that's the value. If we plug in, we'll get 0 in our denominator. Let's continue multiplying and dividing and look at number 3. So first we're going to factor each numerator and denominator if we can. So our first numerator on the left, we have a greatest common factor of 6. And our denominator, we have a greatest common factor of 5. Second numerator, we can factor out a 9. And denominator we can factor out as 7. Now we can divide out any numerator with any denominator. So my x plus 4s will divide out. My x minus 7s will divide out. And then I'm going to multiply straight across. So 6 times 9 is 54. 5 times 7 is 35. And that can't be reduced. Now I'm going to look one step above and see what values would make those denominators 0. So on the left, 7 would, so I need to exclude 7, and on the right, negative 4. So our final answer is 54/35, and x cannot equal 7 and negative 4. Our final problem on multiplying and dividing is number 4. So I notice that my numerator in the upper left is factored, so I can just rewrite that. The denominator I can factor out of 5. Times, here I have a trinomial, so I can see what two numbers will multiply to give me 2 and add to give me 3. So that would be 1 and 2. So this will factor as x plus 1 times x plus 2. And then in the denominator we have two numbers that will multiply to give us 6 and combine to give us 5. So 2 and 3 will work for that. So this will factor as x plus 2 times x minus 3. Now we can divide out any numerator with any denominator. So our x plus 3s will divide out. The x plus 2s will divide out. And we'll be left with x plus 1 all over 5 times x plus 4. I just check and make sure that nothing else will simplify with that, and it won't. So now to give my domain rule, I'm going to look one step up and exclude all the values that make all those denominators negative. So the first expression, I need to exclude negative 4. And the second one, a negative 2, and then finally a negative 3. So our final answer is x plus 1 over 5 times x plus 4, where x cannot equal negative 4, negative 2, and negative 3.